Hello there, Sir from 17 once again. This is my Last Guardian walkthrough, and I have to apologise folks, the next two videos are going to feature me with a compromised voice, a rather questionable throat. It's all that gay pornography guys, it catches up with you. But it doesn't hurt, so it's not a painful thing, and I don't feel under the weather, I just have a shit throat right now that's making me sound like I've been drinking more than I have, and that's not true. But this is The Last Guardian. If you're new to the channel, this is a walkthrough. We're currently in the final third of the game. Good old Trico is getting ready to do some jumps, but I don't think he's going to do them because some people throwing spears at us. So you might not have seen that just then, but that was a projectile. And across the way from us, there's going to be two nests full of the automatron guys, and we need to use the shield to get rid of them. You see them just there? Top of the screen? On the tower? I see them. There we go. And then you hold this and it charges Trico's tail, and tail does laser, laser's very effective, and then repeat ad nauseum. This is an interesting mechanic, this, because it's fundamentally shitty. And you can see that right now. For some reason, the camera does this wonderful auto-correction where it will actively make it so you can't see where you're aiming. Because Trico's body goes fucking nuts. And you know, if you try and move the camera to try and see, you move the aimer, and it'll just ruin the shot. And it leads to these really awkward moments of the game just obstructs your vision while you're trying to do this very simple thing. And it doesn't ever justify why. That's not mentioning there are a few rooms in the game where you use the shield and you can't see the beam. And I'll never get this. Nier Automata does something very similar. When you charge the L1 shot on Nier, it does like a laser-guided line to show you where the projectile will go when you release it. But it's such a colour and such a set of translucency that you can't see it. So it's really difficult to see where the line is, and I don't understand the point of making a reticle to guide aiming if the player can't see it right in certain situations. And in Nier it's just really hard to see anyway, because it's like brown and everything in that game is brown. But in this game it doesn't make sense to have an area that's so bright and so like exposed, so ridiculously just overexposed, so that when you do this green laser beam you can't see the laser. But it does it, you know, it's just one of those things. The game loves to just completely blast you with the contrast so that you can see these wonderful contrasts, literally. As we command Trico to come through this area, and then proceed to climb him. He is pretty damn cute, you know, there's something special about Trico, there really is. But he'd have probably died if he'd have been my pet, because I would have kicked him that many times, he'd probably die. And I know it's a horrible thing to say, isn't it, the idea of kicking an animal, which you should never kick animals. If you don't know that, you're probably not doing too well in life. But the impulse and the want to kick an animal every so often can be rather strong. And I think with Trico it would have been too strong, and I probably just kicked it into a river and let all the people who really like animals come and pour blood on me and crucify me as example. But Trico's not doing what we want. This is not a new thing. The way he responds is unique unto itself. There are so many people defending it, calling it intentional, which is not. And I'm sorry if you think that way, you're wrong. It's just the product of a lot of programming coming together, coalescing into something less than stellar. Natural, organic, definitely, but not good. And that's the argument. You know, that's the point I will always come back to with The Last Guardian. I think this game's going to be remembered more so for the issues than it will be for the qualities, because the qualities are very, very high, but they're often just completely squandered by all the low points. And it's a shame too, because it's not a bad game, and if you just like the relationship between, you know, Trico and the boy, I can imagine people getting a lot from this. Quite recently, good old Darkside Phil, somebody who I mention quite a lot, he's just a YouTuber, don't overthink it. He was talking about how a guy called Jacksepticeye and PewDiePie got really upset when playing this game, and, you know, got really emotionally involved with the game. And he went on to talk about how they're paid shills and everything, that they were just performing because they were paid to give the game a better outlook than it might necessarily get from somebody like me, who shit on it in this walkthrough quite a lot. But I got emotional at a part of this game, and still I would say that the game is less than stellar in a lot of ways. I think it's very special in a lot of other ways, and I think it's definitely something that should be experienced. But nobody paid me to get upset, and I didn't want to get upset. I just did. And it was a very, very powerful moment, and it was a moment that, at the time, because of how emotional I was, and because of how it struck that chord that, you know, hit me like a lot of things do, in that moment I thought the game was amazing. I really did. I was literally completely smitten for the next hour or so, maybe 2 hours, and then it was towards the end of the game. And the end of the game, I think, is probably the best part of the game, because it really escalates. It's got a good sense of building towards the answers. It's got a lot of bad gameplay in it, but you can look past it because of that resonance that I mentioned. And then, of course, you get the ending, and the ending, I think, is another emotional part of it. But the idea that these people performing to make the game, you know, look as better than it is kind of a silly thing to say, and I know you're shocked. Darkside Phil saying something silly again? Never happens, right? But I do think it's silly to say. And it's hypocritical as well from good old Phil's perspective. Because his review shits on this game for 20 odd minutes, and then he gives it a 7 out of 10. And I'm sorry guys, but a 7 out of 10 is a really good grade. In my grading metric, anyhow, which is why I don't do metrics, because I think they're fundamentally pointless, and it kind of proves itself, doesn't it, in this little discussion. How can you talk for 22 minutes about a game that is draconian and barely works, and that's filled you with nothing but frustration, bored you the entire time, that you do not think is worth $50, and then go on to give it a 7 out of 10? That to me doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. And then the irony, what even is that? The irony, sorry, is he reviewed Dead Rising 4, which is a game he had a ton of fun with, and he gave it 6 out of 10. Because he was saying how it had been casualized and made too easy. And it's just that thing of, well, this doesn't correlate to what you presented in your playthroughs. Because if you watch his playthroughs, he's just, well, don't watch his playthroughs, but anyhow, he essentially sucked the game's dick the entire time and praised the fact that it was dumbed down and made easier because then it wasn't as frustrating as the first few. But then he goes on to give it a worse review than a game he actively hated. And then when people call him out on this, he goes on to question their intellect and their intelligence and how they can interact in an adult world. And I always find that really, really interesting. That's the first thing he goes to. It's an interesting defense mechanism that he has there. I love insulting people's intelligence because I find it funny. But I also know that if you insult someone's intelligence who is intelligent, they generally can tell that that's what you're doing, and because they've got a confidence in their own ability, will not be offended. So then it's more of a joke, it's less of an insult. But Phil just doesn't see that. So instead he gets these really, really eloquent sentences back, kind of breaking down why his opinion fundamentally fails when it comes to critiquing these people with this bizarre ad hominem usage, and then boom, he just probably doesn't reply or just deletes. I mentioned in a video recently, I don't know if you saw it, that he was essentially asking people to give him their Christmas money. If you get anything extra for Christmas, give it to him, because he really needs it to pay his bills. Which is hilarious, isn't it? And somebody said that it was deplorable, and then he said he thinks it's deplorable that they can share their opinion with actual humans, and it's like, wow, you just completely condemn this entire person's opinions because he finds what you do to be rather disgraceful. And I think anybody asking for potentially children's Christmas money is a fucking disgrace. I mean, how can you even argue that? And nobody would with a sane brain, but with that height of delusion, that's not how he sees it, This is a person who's lost all his friends. He has no friends. He spent Christmas Eve and Christmas Day streaming because he's got no friends. The only person he can talk to is his girlfriend, and if you've ever seen him do anything together on camera, it's brutal to watch. He ignores her completely. It's such a strange thing. I hope he's way more affectionate than he shows on those videos, but there's no reason to be a different person to your girlfriend on a video than you would off a video. Don't get that. That to me is weird. By the way, if you're wondering what just happened then, Trico took a shit. I didn't want him to. I wanted him to do his running jump and get us to the end of this part of the level. But instead he decided not to. And you'll notice if we look back, as he goes the wrong direction, because he's great at that, you'll see there's a couple of little cabbages of shit over there. There you go, little balls of shit. So he's got a pretty good diet of human barrels, or whatever that is. But the game is interesting, you know, and I think that is a quality nowadays that we've lost in a lot of ways. Games aren't interesting anymore. Not many of them. Some of them really are. Some of them definitely catch that imagination, but for the most, we seem to be a consumer that's lost that imagination, and they seem to be developers that are being paid to spread just the same ideas. You know, it's the same way that Hollywood does its wonderful just horage of everything that was once good until it becomes bad. You know, they take, and then it's lost. As we achieve flight for the first time, and it's a good moment. But unfortunately, it's sandwiched between this section coming up, which is a bad moment, because it's combat, and it's combat against a lot of these men. And it just... God, if you could control Trico, man. Just anything but this. And if you get good Trico here, with good AI, this is quick, because I've managed to do this really fast. And then on my recording run, it took ages. Which is just the Last Guardian in a nutshell. It really is, isn't it? But I do believe that, folks. I do believe that we're losing a lot of creativity now in the pursuit of accessibility and in the pursuit of things that don't matter. Like 4K and HDR features and things like that. And I don't think they matter for gameplay, even though they can have impacts on gameplay. Right there, if you're wondering, I was trying to see if I could do two things at the same time. Let Trico kill the people on the floor while I aimed up at the dudes chucking spears. But every time Trico bucks, he moves you and knocks you around. And it's very difficult to aim with the shield, so it's really not worth doing it. If you can get some shield shots off here and kill some of the ground troops, it makes this really fast. But additionally, it's not the easiest thing to do for Last Guardian reasons, so don't kick yourself too hard if you don't manage to clean them up. And just be aware that there will be shield people coming, and the shield people are the ones you need to get rid of or bad things happen. Going back to what I was saying though, I'm not going to be somebody that tells you that HDR is not important, and I'm not going to be somebody that tells you that 4K is not important. I just think it's unnecessary at the moment. And I say that as somebody who remembers the transition from standard definition to high definition. When we were in standard definition, we didn't see a need for anything more because we didn't know what that meant. We had no concept of it. We had no way to tell that it was so much better. I also saw the transition between VHS tapes to DVD, and once again, when you were on the tapes, you didn't see a difference, you didn't notice a difference. But then when it happened and there was that ubiquitous changeover to the new standard, and you went back, it was an amazing difference, because you couldn't see the forest for the trees, you really couldn't. It's cliche, but it's true. And that's what 4K is, that's what HDR is. I'm under no illusion when the transition for everybody having that technology happens, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be so beautiful and so visually appealing that you're not going to be able to imagine a world without it. It's like a world without the internet or a world without mobile phones. Some people just can't. I can, because my phone's broken and I'm using it as an alarm clock. And it's the same one I've had for like 12 years, because I hate them. But that's neither here nor there. I can't imagine a world without the internet, even though I lived in one for a long time. And I didn't get the internet in my bedroom until I was like 18. So it's a big thing, and it's a big change, because you can't imagine it. You know, people think we're getting stupider because we don't remember things anymore. We just Google them. We Google things instead of remembering because it's too convenient. It's made us lazy. And I don't think that's wrong. You know, I think there's a lot of truth to that, although I still think we're capable of learning, and some people who want to learn will learn, because, you know, some people who want to eat silica packets will die, and then we'll get warnings on silica packets, enabling those future idiots to breed more idiots. But you need a couple idiots, because who's going to dig the graves for the nice people, you know? But HDR and 4K are not important yet in the grand scheme of my experience for gaming, because I'm ignorant of them. Of course, I've played PC games at 1440p, and you can tell that they look a lot better. You can tell. 4K is something that I can't comprehend because I've never needed to, and I never will until it's in my house. And until that point, I don't really look to what they're doing to implement that technology. I'm glad they are, because I think it boosts progress. It makes people push, and I'm all for pushing. But as it stands, does it really matter how black the blacks are? Or how pretty the resolution is when all you're doing is going from chest-high wall to chest-high wall shooting people? With regenerating life? In a modern military scenario? No. I think the fundamental issue is we're not moving forward in what we do in games, in what makes the scripting works, in what makes those events trigger, and what those events are, creatively. That's where we're being complacent. That's where we're losing our spark. The technology will always be amazing, and it will always be pushed, and it will always go somewhere great. But if you use the technology to do the things you're always doing, then it just leads to stagnation. And then that's the argument that I would push. I would prefer creative people to come up with creative new ways of using what we have, while the engineers create the new shiny, beautiful, deepest of blacks, wonderful contrast on the television. And at the moment, I don't think we've got that. I think we've got a lot of standard archetypes in gaming being pushed on a visual spectrum that not a lot of people can afford and not a lot of people want just yet. And don't get me wrong, this will change. There's no... Like, right now, I'm going to predict, and I'm not, Nostradamus, I'm not Leonardo da Vinci, I'm nobody like that, but I will predict there will come a time when that technology and the technologies that supersede it are standard. Are completely ubiquitous. They are everywhere. They are taken for granted. And they will be affordable too. Because that's what happens to that kind of technology. Also, this bit fucking sucks. This is one of the worst sections of the game I've ever played. But I completely didn't realise that there's one way of doing this that's really effective, that somebody mentioned in a live stream or on a comment. Somebody much more The Last Guardian-y than myself came up with a really good idea for doing this section. Once you set off a bunch of these people and they start chasing you, if you run into the middle area and you jump across the void, it gives you a window of time to use your shield, and you can use Trico's tail to blast the soldiers. And for whatever reason, I just never thought of doing that, Call it my stupid moment, call it just, not seeing the forest for the trees. Whatever the excuse is, I'm 100% guilty of. I just war of attrition this. I lure them around the area, and then I run the other way, and then I hit the signs, and that's all I do. And it does take a while. It's not fun at all. It's completely miserable, but it worked for me the first time, and it's the method that I'm going to show here. But you'll notice in here there is a tail, of course, so use the tail. I absolutely never thought to do it. So touche to whoever that was. Full credits to them. It's a really good strategy. Learn from my mistakes, folks. It's always good. Up to me, I'd remove this entire section in the game. I think it's unnecessary padding. It adds nothing, and it just exacerbates the terrible combat. But that's just me, folks. But yeah, beautiful visuals are great. They really are. But there's more people who don't appreciate and don't realise through ignorance that visuals don't make the game. And you see it a lot when you go on forums. You've all seen this post, because I see it every fucking day. The person who says, I don't care about the frame rate, I just want it to be 1080p. Can you even fathom that sentence? Because I have trouble with it, I really do. Because it's a fundamental misunderstanding of how games play. And there's one thing we can all agree on, regardless of how much we disagree, and that's the part where we play, right? That's why we're here. Some people play for story, that's fine. I've been that person, I will be that person again. Some people play for, I don't know, companionship, maybe co-op with friends, maybe just social pressures. Insert reasons for why they play, but fundamentally, it has to be for the game. Unless there's something really obscure that appeals. I like to think that when we boil it down to its base element, when we get all Full Metal Alchemist on its ass, it's the gameplay, yeah? It's playing the game part. Nobody plays Tetris for the menus. You'll play it for the music, because it's amazing. You'll play it because you're on the toilet, because it's amazing. But Tetris is game. Tetris is the video game, yeah? Well, that's how I see it anyway. It's a video game. It's a great one too. It's like chess. It's probably one of the chesses of video games, because it's simple. Anybody can play it. Incredibly difficult to master. Only difference is you need insane reflexes and like pattern recognition, and in chess it's all about the mental game, isn't it? Less reflex driven. But you know what I mean. Gameplay is the absolute 100% main reason that people play games. Mostly. It's hard to be talking absolutes because there's always that person that's like, I play it for the boobs. It's like, yes, we all play it for the boobs, just don't tell your girlfriend. Or don't tell your mum, or whatever. But when you get right down to it, in the old George Carlin way, gameplay is the draw. And I am somebody who gameplay is the only real draw. Everything else is a bonus, you know? Straight up. Because to me, if the foundation of your game is the best part of the game, then everything else should benefit. It's like a rising tide. Everything goes up. You know, every ship rises. And that's what I think they should aspire to. So when you see these comments of people saying like, oh, as long as it's 1080p, I don't care what the frame rate is, I don't think they understand. I think it is 100% ignorance of not really getting what's wrong. Like, this is a person who doesn't realise that those times when they pressed the button and it never happened, and they died because of it, and they got really frustrated. What did they think that was? Like, oh, goddamn 720 fucking p. If that had been 1080p, I'd have got that. Like, no, that's not what that was. What? Are they people that don't see that? Or don't blame that? Or maybe they'd never die? I don't know. But it makes me wonder if they've ever seen a game run at like 5 frames a second. And a great way to be accustomed to frame rate is with editing software. If you've ever edited for television, or if you've ever messed with editing settings, there are a lot of different settings for editing. Most of them will try and make you go to 23.99 frames, 24 frames, anywhere between 23 to 24 frames, because it's the industry standard for television. It's been the standard for a long time, because it was what was weighed at the time as the most appealing frame rate for the eye, for that particular medium. And it's one of those things that, once was established, became a fundamental law of filmmaking and any kind of moving image making. Very popular, because it just has that right amount of smoothness and right amount of sharpness that your eye interpolates as footage. Video games aren't like that. Video games move. Video games are much higher frame rate. So when you edit in software, which has got incredibly easy to do compared to the old days when they used to have to do this shit on the film, like that, can you imagine those days? My god, those people. Geniuses. Straight up. I love those people for what they did, but I could have never been them. It would have been beyond me. But we work with much higher frame rates now, so you can have these fluctuations. And not only that, you can amend the material by affecting its speed. And when you affect its speed, you affect how many frames are shown at a certain duration on the timeline. You can scrub through an entire piece of footage, like this video right now. It tells me here it's 26 minutes, 51 seconds, and 28 frames long. That's the full duration of this video, according to my timeline right here. I can scrub through this frame by frame. If I do that per second, that's 1 frame a second. So I can see an experience of this game at 1 frame a second. Depending on your speed, you can alternate those speeds to how much you get. If this ran at 60 frames per second, I could half it, 50% speed, and that would be a 30% representation of the frame rate. If this was 30 and I doubled the speed, it'd look weird, but you could say that that was a 60 frames per second example of how the frames are working there. Even though, you know, as a game it'd be completely unplayable. If you've ever played like the emulator in 200 frames and it's just too fast to be functional, yet there are games that work at 144 quite easily because they're made to, rather than just accelerating the hardware. So you can see the difference between all these frame rates just by applying a few effects on some editing software, or just by scrubbing through a timeline. I mean, you can probably do this in VLC Player with certain commands, or Windows Media Player. There's so many ways to see the difference between frame rates, even if your eye can't pick up necessarily what frame rate a game is, because your eye's very good at that. That's what it does. It's its job. Its job is not to question the frames, its job is to interpret the frames, and it does it very well. But it struggles occasionally until it gets used to it, and that's one of the reasons why you can get used to a game that's low frame rate. It's one of those compromises where your eye is kind of bringing itself down to its level, but your eye will adjust and you'll get used to it. It's that simple. So it makes me wonder if these people saw this, or if these people were aware of this, and they might be. Maybe they haven't put, you know, 2 and 2 together. If they would understand why it's more important than how pretty something is. Because I always bring it back to the same example, don't I, with the Barbie doll. A Barbie can be perfect. Perfect skin, perfect eyes, perfect face, perfect, symmetry, perfect lines, perfect tits, perfect everything. But then when it gets down to the good stuff, there's nothing there. Fundamentally, there's no fun to be had. Because it's missing that core element. And that is what resolution over frame rate is, in my opinion. So when I see those forums, I can't help but think ignorant. Because it has to be, right? I watch a channel called Digital Foundry, and I'm quite ignorant of a lot of the stuff on Digital Foundry because it's way more advanced than what I know. But by watching those videos and listening to those people, I'm learning more about certain aspects of gaming that I didn't really know about. And it's really interesting to see all these things that I don't really know what they are, but by watching these videos and listening to these people who do talk about them, I know way more about post-processing effects and super sampling and all these other things that they're talking about with the anti-aliasing this and the frame buffers this and just a lot of highly technical stuff that I would have never really known too much about, but I'm watching this channel because it puts it in a really palatable way, and they're preaching essentially the importance on both visual fidelity and on performance that a heavy frame or a high frame rate has, and showing you that this is important stuff. And I love that channel for that, because it's educating people that it's not necessarily just about how beautiful something is, it's how it moves as well, and how it moves is so much more important than ever how it looks. But there's a lot of people that don't know that. So thank you very much for watching, and you take care now.